Long days this past week.
It's been a long day this past week. Yeah, it has. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Stable Diffusion for Professional Creatives. Today, we'll be looking at how, alongside Guillaume, a creative director, we created a workflow and generated images for Barragán's new capsule collection. Today's video will be slightly different than usual, so instead of starting off with the workflow and how to build it, we'll start with an interview with Guillaume, the creative director for the project, who will tell us about this project, the deadlines, the difficulties that we had to face, as well as how he sees generative AI in the future of the field. After that, we'll be taking a look at the workflow we constructed together, and I will guide you through all the hoops that we had to go through in order to face this project. As always, you will be able to find the full workflow in the description below. This time though, you won't be able to find all of the models that we used. In particular, you won't be able to find the exact checkpoint that we use, since that is a particular custom checkpoint. You can use some other checkpoints that are more geared towards realism in order to test this out or for research purposes, and I will point those out to you as non-commercial alternatives. Since this whole project started with Guillaume finding out about this channel and hitting me up on Instagram, I thought, what better way to delve into this project than actually hearing from him? Hello and welcome, Guillaume. All right, so yeah, I've got a few questions for you. First question: who are you?
My name is Guillaume Boucher. I'm an art director, creative director. Yeah, work in fashion and beauty and art. Living in New York and Paris, and yeah, that's about it.
That's about it. Okay, great. And how did you get involved with generative AI?
But yeah, so I got into AI. I think it's from school. I learned to basically upscale images, and that's really when I started to touch AI. And then it's been just like a year where I've played around, like retouching images a lot, and integrated that to my practice.
That's good. That's great. So, how did you find me? Because like this all kind of started with you finding me and hitting me up on Instagram and telling me that you had some projects.
Yeah, no, I think this is something that is really interesting because you have a photographer style and eye that I was like pretty much like looking for in the field. It's true that right now, like I feel like we're all to like AI, like it's such a big playground. But I was really into the fact that you integrate that to your business, basically to your like art practice. And I think you're not an illustrator, you're not an art director, you're a photographer, and it really shows in the image you pick and the quality, the generative images you make, basically.
Can you tell something about this project and something about Retina as well?
Retina is a creative studio that integrates AI into its work. I think we are not shying away from the fact that there's like a lot of artifacts still, that there's a lot of like weirdness about it. But I've been basically working a lot with like brands that embrace the accidents and like are not scared of being weird. And I think Barragán is one of them, and it was the perfect project to do AI models
Yeah,
with
it
these
looks
guys.
like a perfect fit in a way.
Yeah. I think we're in a stage where AI is getting there, but it's not yet for the big luxury ones. But for the ones that are not scared, it's perfect.
So, what were you asked to do for Barragan?
Yeah, but again, I started as like proposing like content and working on the show, and after like get more involved into the brand strategy. So now like I'm overseeing a little bit the launch of the drops and like what's happening on the website, what's happening on the social rollout. My idea was to basically like make our life easier, basically like shooting e-commerce images through the AI. And I still say shooting. I should just say generate images.
Yeah, force of habit, I guess.
So yeah, there's a big collapse between my work, who has been traditionally like being working with like photographers, planning, strategy, and concepting. That was a challenge for me too in that project. It's like I wanted to push myself to use AI as like my new workflow.
And that's when you brought me on board to devise a workflow together that could generate like different poses, different characters, different people for the launch of this capsule collection, right?
Exactly. I think we're like it's such a good team in that project, since like you have a lot of like experience into shooting and like be able to understand what an ecom needs. And I think, as you said, I remember like it's not about to create the image, but it's also about to create your personal workflow. And as you know, like we know that we need to pay attention to the face. We need to pay attention to consistency, and
Yeah,
you know
absolutely.
these things come from your background, and I think this is really what I was looking for, working with you.
About the project itself, what did we want to do? What were you looking for in this project? Like, we needed to generate people who were wearing real item of clothing, real accessories, stuff like that. So, how
Yeah,
did you start working on that? Like, you came to me that you already had some AI models, and then we had to build a workflow that could actually implement those AI models with
yeah,
real clothing. So
yeah.
how did it go?
No, yeah, I mean there's like different things, right? There's first the styling. I think this is important to integrate into that project, and after there's like the art direction on its own. Like, do we want a white background or gray background? Like, what type of models do we want? And then on top of it, there's this whole technical aspect, which is like, how do we do it? How long is it going to take? And in that project, basically, I was looking to recreate basically something that we already seen in the world, which is like a white background with like a really well lit models. And for that, basically, we were thinking that maybe we could just shoot real people, no models, in their environment, so at home, with natural light, and based on that, get the hat information, the clothes information, and be able to swap them with like models
Yeah.
generated through AI. And I think it was successful in the way that we were fast, it was
Yeah.
cheap, and
Yeah, it
and
was fast ship, and yeah, you were talking about the time constraint. Like, all of this was done in basically, I mean, my part was done in 24 hours roughly, and your part was done in what, like 72 hours, something like that, 48. That
yeah,
was insane. And like, this, I think it's a nice thing to consider. Like, we usually don't think about it when, at least when I am presenting workflows to the community, we're not talking about how much time we have, if we have any deadlines. All of this is just theoretical in a way, but this was practical. Like, we had to deliver results in a few
yeah,
hours.
yeah. And this doesn't, you cannot like put experiments in that
Yeah.
moment. You need to know what you're doing, basically.
Yeah.
You need to know that, yeah, this is the look you want. Like, there's no like experimentation during this type of project.
And just one last question, and after that, if you want to add more, please do. What were like the challenges that you had with this project in particular, and where do you see generative AI in fashion and the creative fields, based on what you already seen before this project and what you learned in this project?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're in the some kind of like turning point, like a pivot point at the moment, where we had fun. We're seeing things around. We're all excited about it. I think at this moment we're looking for people that kind of like are able to merge different worlds together. So not only coming from engineering, but like maybe have like a background in like marketing or like a background in photography. Because at the end of the day, is by being able to like merge different workflows, different way of thinking is where we're going to be able to like push AI to the next level. There's obviously like a lot of technical points, but for me, I'm sure this is like something we can like fix it later. But basically, what I'm really interested in with AI is more like when like a sculptor or like a photographers or like a casting director is going to be really integrate AI to their practice.
Yeah, we were talking about it, I think, during our first call together. Like, we are at a point, I think so too, where we have a lot of theory going around and a lot of people doing practice on things that are not production ready or production adjacent. But we need actual people who work actual productions in order to understand what's needed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, because that will help you and the whole community to understand where this can be applied, basically, where AI generative images can be done and can be helpful for everyone.
Yeah, and where it actually makes sense. All right, great. Do you have anything else you would like to say about
No,
this
I think
project, about who you are, about what are your next steps in the field?
no. The next steps is definitely keep going and see if it can be scalable.
And that was some very good insights from Guillaume. Now we'll move on to the workflow. So, the workflow. The workflow may seem complicated, but it's actually much simpler than it looks. It's basically two workflows rolled into one. As you can see here, we've got different groups doing different things, and I will show each one to you in a second. But it's basically two workflows, one that does a single character in a single pose, regardless of character consistency, and another that does character sheets, so that the character consistency can roll over in more than one pose. When one workflow is enabled, for example, the one for the single pose over here, the other for the character sheet is disabled, this one down over here, and the opposite is true. When the character sheet is enabled, the other one for the single pose is disabled. Now we're going to look at each individual part so that you can understand better what's going on. This is the core of the workflow. For this demonstration, we're using as a checkpoint Juggernaut, but you can also use RealViz, for example, and both are not the model we used. The model we used is our own model, so we can't disclose that. In our testing though, both Juggernaut and RealViz are comparable to what we got in the end. Then we've got two LoRa's. They are from the same suite. One is Boring Realism Primary and the other is Boring Realism Faces. Both of these LoRa's concur in getting a more realistic person and image. We decided on using them because the results we were getting were too airbrushed in a way, so we wanted a more realistic human, a more realistic character. Then there's a third LoRa that is disabled when generating just one character in just one pose, but it's enabled when generating a character sheet, and that is a model sheet LoRa. And what it does, it basically grants consistency throughout the poses. Then we got our positive and negative prompt field, our K-sampler, and our VAE encode. Now, starting from the VAE encode, the VAE encode node takes the image from the image resize node, and the image resize node is fed from a load image node where we loaded a picture of a reference that we wanted to use in the end for the final t-shirt design or for the final garment design. Here the subject has their face pixelated because of anonymity, but you don't have to pixelate it, you can just use normal reference images. We then resize it into the right sizing for our final result and then feed it into a depth map node and into an open pose node. And then both of those are fed into two different control nets, one for depth and one for open pose. And then to the side, there is a control net troubleshoot group that displays the depth map and the open pose image. The same thing is happening down here for the model sheet reference image. In this case, of course, the proportions are reversed, so the width and height of the pictures are inversed. But once it's resized, the image goes through a depth map and an open pose, and then gets analyzed by an apply control net for depth and for open pose. And again, on the right, we have a troubleshoot group. At the top, we've got an IP adapter plus face group. We're using IP adapter version 2, and we have two different IP adapters depending on the character that we want to use. The one on the left is female, the one on the right is male. When one is turned on, the other is bypassed, and the opposite is true. When the other is turned on, the first one is bypassed. We then decode the first image, which is going to be smaller in size than what we want, and if the results are good, we pass them on to a face detailer group. The face detailer group enhances the face, and after that's done, we go on to an ultimate upscaler group. If everything looks good at this point, we generated a lot more images so that we can composite them together inside of Photoshop in order to take the best parts of each picture that we generated and composite it into a final image that we liked. A final passage that is not present here, since it's not doable inside of ComfyUI, it's a Magnific AI pass. Now, you don't have to do a Magnific AI pass. It's not open source, it's not free to use, but Guillaume felt like the details we were getting from the Ultimate Upscaler were not good enough for production. So what we did is just a quick pass in Magnific AI in order to bring out more detail. And that's basically it. We're generating poses and characters that are consistent, and then what we're doing is compositing each part that we feel like is the best part on top of others in order to generate our ultimate sort of character. And then, since the reference picture had the same spatial coordinates and positioning as the picture we're generating, we can just blend in the original item of clothing, the original accessory, into the generated image. This could even be automated with the segment anything node from a video from a couple of weeks ago that I showed you. But since we didn't have the time to fully automate the process, and this was just a small capsule collection, we didn't have the need to actually do that. It was just faster and easier to do that all in Photoshop. Now, something went really well and some others had some issues. As I was saying before, we only had like 72 hours combined in order to deliver results. I had 24 hours to come up with a workflow that could work and could scale, and Guillaume had another 48 hours to deliver the results to the client. So in order to simplify things, we ended up not using character consistencies for different poses. The client didn't feel like they had a need to get more different poses than just the frontal one, so we scaled down to just a single character creation in a front-facing position. Also, some poses worked better than others. For example, 3/4 from the back didn't go quite as well as front-facing ones or side ones. And that's because face detailer and IP adapter always try to find a face, and if they can't, they kind of act up. The results are a bit scuffed. And 3/4 from the back is a position that is often used in e-commerce websites. But since face detailer can actually still see a bit of the face, it's always going to try and turn the face around in order to face the camera. I am sure one could overcome that issue by custom training a LoRa that is trained on 3/4 from the back positions, but at that point we didn't have the time to try new things. We had to deliver. And that brings us back to what I think is a fantastic lesson learned in this tutorial. Guillaume and I were talking about in the earlier section, but the thing is, most of the tutorials out there, and most of the tutorials I do as well, they concentrate on a theoretical level, whereas this was practical. We had a deadline that was really close, and we couldn't spend time trying out new things. We couldn't spend time experimenting. In a production environment, in the real world, you have to come up with solutions that can work, but in a reasonable time frame. You don't have the luxury of spending weeks, months, or years perfecting a workflow. So, could these results be better with a few weeks more, with a few months more? Yeah, absolutely. But that was not the task. The task was coming up with something that could be done in 72 hours. So all in all, I am quite happy with the results we got. I hope Guillaume is too. And what's better is that we kind of demonstrated that the tech is there. The tech can actually be applied to production environments. Now, obviously, this particular brand and client, Barragán, is always trying to go above and beyond in terms of research and development and trying out new things. Other brands might not have the same kind of vision, might not want the same results, may not find the same results acceptable. But when you compare this kind of results to what we could deliver 6 months or a year ago, then you can see that the tech has leapt forward a lot. So this is it for today. I hope you learned something from this and you found this interesting. I know this is kind of different from the tutorials I did before, but I was very excited to show you a real life example. And it's not every day that you can actually show the inner working of a campaign. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. This helps a lot since this is a new channel. If you have any questions and want to know more about this workflow, feel free to do so in the comments. We'll try to answer as best as we can. I am Andrea Baioni. You can find me on Instagram at risunobushi or on the web at andreabaioni.com. And you can find Guillaume on Instagram at legui. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you next week.